I don't really know how to start this um, podcast or whatever you want to call it. So I'm just going to get to the point. Recently, today is August 22nd, 23rd, something like that. Um, we lost our father on August 7th um, of this month. And I just don't really know how to process it. Um, I you always hear people tell you like, "Oh, I lost my mother or my dad," or and it's like you'll go, "Oh, that's so sad," and you just kind of like, "Oh," you know, like I would feel for them, but I realize now that like I did not feel for them. It was like impossible for me to feel for them. I didn't understand what it was like to lose a parent. Um, and honestly, for the most part, people who I've talked to that have lost a parent, it's like it'll be older people. So it's kind of like that's the way you assume it'll happen in life. Like when you get old, then your parents will pass away of like natural causes, or they'll start to get sick, and then you like prepare for it. And so, it's just kind of like, oh, it's the circle of life. But I now know that it was impossible for me to genuinely feel for them. I just didn't. My whole 31 years of life, I've had my father. So it's like now I have to go without having him. And it's been a few days. So in my head right now, it just kind of feels like, oh, I haven't talked to my daddy yet in a week or two. Or. But it's like it has to set in that it's like, no, you're never going to talk to your daddy again. And I think that that's the part that is just not, it's not real to me because, again, 31 years, I've had my dad. I've had access to my dad. If I want to see my dad, I can get up and go see him. If I want to call him, I can pick the phone up and call him. Like, it was just always an option for me. And I think like with him passing away, of course you always think about, oh, I wish I could have spent more time. I wish I wouldn't have said this, wouldn't have did that, da da da. But I think what's really, really setting in for me is I've kind of been like gaining the understanding of unconditional love lately in the past couple of months. And I think the biggest thing for me, what I realized is that I don't know how to say this without sounding harsh. I I don't think that I was going to be honest, I don't think I had an unconditional love for my dad. I think my love for him came out of like, of course I loved him because he was my dad, and he was a great dad. Don't get me wrong. My daddy was an amazing dad. It's just my dad he was addicted to drugs. So obviously when you're dealing with anybody that is a drug addict, it impacts everyone around them, and it kind of spirals to other things. It's like, oh, you're addicted to drugs. That kind of takes you away from your friends and family sometimes. That kind of puts you in a position to where you're begging for money, you're begging for things, you just don't have your life in order, stuff like that. So I'm not gonna lie, my daddy was kind of like what's the word for it? I don't know the exact term I can use for it, but it would be kind of like if he's calling us, the other sibling would call and be like, "Did my daddy call you? What did he want? He wanted some money." because he calling me. Let me see. Or like, no, he was just calling to say hey and check in on me. Oh, okay, well, let me call him back. You know, it was kind of like that. But it made me realize, like, in his passing, like in his obituary, I put like, I need to learn to love people for who they are and where they are. You know, I wanted so much more for my dad because it was kind of like I watched him. We all watched him go downhill, you know, from this addiction because, like I said, it impacts everybody around you. But my daddy, like, used to be that nigga. I'm not gonna hold you up. He owned businesses. He had money. He dressed nice. He looked nice. He just had it. He had it. You know, he had the house. He had the cars. He had the money, the jewelry, all of that stuff. And not to say that that makes you who you are. No, I'm not saying that. But to watch him, like, go from that to like, oh, can I get a couple dollars? Can I? It's just kind of like, you have so much more potential than this. So I used to pray for him all the time. And my daddy used to go out. My daddy used to be hanging. You know, I hear all the stories about him and stuff. And then he just only was in the house. He never left the house. He always stayed in the house. And it was just like, he was just depressed. And so I would always pray that, like, he would not be addicted to drugs anymore and he would be able to just find himself again, you know, because I feel like you can find yourself at any age and just be able to live life. I wanted that for him because he was getting older. You know, I wanted that for him in his life before he died. I wanted him to be able to have a relationship with us where it wasn't like, oh, he's asking for something, or oh, he wants something, or this is annoying. You know, I wanted a relationship with him where it's just like, you know, you feel that joy again, like, oh, my daddy's coming over, or grandpa's here, or, you know, and I could just see him in his full potential again. And unfortunately, that didn't happen before he died. But it made me realize that I I wasn't loving him for who he was, where he was in life. I was trying to force him to be who I wanted him to be. And then it was like, and then once you become that man that I imagined in my mind, then I can love you to the maximum, to the capacity. And I just, in his death, I realized that that's not how he loved me, but that's how I was loving him. So, me being the baby, whenever I didn't get my way or I got an attitude, he never loved me any less. Me, you know, living life and just being in my 20s, being in my whatevers, and not having this needing to ask him for money when I had to ask him for money or a place to stay, or, you know, he didn't look at me and say, oh, here she go again. You know, like, yeah, I love you. I'm gonna help you out, but dang, I wish you would just get your life together and be the daughter I want you to be, so I can love you to your maximum and stand to be around you and not be irritated when you call. And, you know, and I feel like his relationship with drugs and the negative impact it had on his life impacted the way his children viewed him. And it's crazy to say because it's like, we did get to see the negative side of him, but in all of that negativity from drugs, we also got to see the positive side of my dad. And even in the obituary, like, we all mentioned how we lost our Superman, because my daddy, to us, he was Superman. Like, my daddy had a black belt in karate. My daddy, I just, like, when I would hear my uncles talk about him, need I remind you, my uncles are all like 6'2", 6'4", and up, 200 pounds and up. They're big dudes. So to hear my uncles laugh when I asked them, like, you think you would be able to take my daddy if, like, it was both of y'all, if it was all three of y'all? And the biggest uncle was just bust out laughing, and he's like, no, like, DJ, no. He's like, your daddy is quick, your daddy can fight. Like, we cannot handle your dad. So, and when we were kids, we got locked out once. And he literally climbed the side of our house, got into the window, came down the stairs, opened the door, and let us in. So it's like to see my daddy do this stuff, to hear the stories that you hear about my daddy is like that's Superman. That's just like nothing can happen to him. And our family is kind of like we have a dark sense of humor. So, you know, we were able to laugh through our pain or whatever. So it's just like my daddy been on drugs pretty much my whole life. So if drugs don't kill you, like, dude, nothing can stop you. Nothing can kill you. You're just invincible, you know? So, and then it's like just the little things we would see him do. Like my daddy used to do our hair, he used to put our hair in a ponytail, and it was a good ponytail. It wasn't like, oh, I can tell your daddy did your hair. Like, no, he could do our hair in a ponytail. He used to make daddy surprises. My daddy can cook. Like, my daddy just loved us. And it was four of us. And we always say, well, it was five of us, but we always say, the four of us, we always say, my daddy, my daddy, my daddy. And then my cousin sister, she's the only one that says, oh, daddy said call. So it's just kind of funny that we do that. But everybody will be like, oh, y'all got different daddies? Y'all got a different mama? And we're like, no, we got the same daddy. And then people will be like, same daddy, same mama. We're like, yeah. And in today's world, to have 4 or 5 kids by the same man is like, whoa, it's just unheard of now. But our daddy had a lot of qualities, and it's like to know, I don't know, even through him having a drug addiction, I know that I was loved by my daddy. I know that my daddy loved us. I know that even with him saying like, oh, can I get some money from you? Or can I get, if I were to call him and I needed some money or I needed this or I needed that, he's gonna find a way to get it. And I think that's why I hold men and fathers at such a high standard, because I'm like not trying to be funny, but if my dad can be a top tier dad as a drug addict, there's no excuse for you not to be an average dad with nothing stopping you, no addictions, nothing holding you back, nothing. But I don't know. I just think that, I try not to say I regret not doing this or I regret doing that. And but I just wish that I would have paid attention to my daddy's qualities, while he was here. And I wish that I could have given him, like half of the amount of love that he gave me and my siblings. And I wish, I wouldn't have judged him, for his addiction. And I don't know. I try not to harp on it too much because it's said and done now. There's nothing I can do to take it back. And don't get me wrong, I love my daddy, and I loved him when he was alive, and I love him now. It's just stuff that you kind of pay attention to. So if it's anybody that's like dealing with a parent or family member that does have an addiction, just pick up the phone when they call, even if they want something from you. Even if it's like their billionth time telling you, oh, I'm done with this, I'm done with that, and they still go right back to it. Just learn to work your way around that. Like, no, I can't offer this to you right now, but how you been doing? You want to go get something to eat? What's going on with you? Let's hang out on this day. Let's do this on that day. Because at the end of the day, they're still a person. They still have interesting things. They still have a life. They still have love to give, love to receive. And like I say, I wouldn't be who I am today without my daddy. And I just really, I can genuinely say that I I know how a first person feels who lost a parent. Um, and it's making me kind of cling to my mama a little bit more. And it's also making me nervous because our family, like on my mama's side, they live long, and I'm not being mean or like spiteful or anything, but I just wasn't expecting this. Like my mother's mother is still alive. My mom is in her 60s and she still has her mama and her daddy. So it's just kind of like I'm only in my 30s. Like, why don't I still have my daddy? My daddy was in his 60s. He's young. He's 64. Like, what do you mean? You know? So I really was not expecting that. And there's nothing that can prepare you for that. And I think that people kind of have this habit of basing your grief off of how close you were to that person, or, you know, there's people who never even met their dad or their mother before. And when they pass away, it's like they grieve and it's a lot. And I feel like you can't tell a person how to grieve and you can't expect to know how they're going to grieve. And I think that we kind of need to stop doing that, you know? Like it was a lot of people that were saying like, "Oh, how is DJ gonna take this?" Because again, I'm the baby, I'm the youngest one. I was the only one that lived in the same state as him. My other siblings, I have my sister lives in Texas. My other sister lives in Oklahoma. My other sister lives in Atlanta. My brother lives in New York. So it's like I was the only one that was here with him, and I was a daddy's girl. So I guess people kind of thought I was going to take it the hardest. But it's like if you really think about it, my brother had him the longest, so he knows him the best. So it's like maybe he'll take it the hardest. You never know. Or my three oldest sisters, they might take it the hardest, but people are kind of basing it off your personality too. Like I got a sister that's just, she's trying to be so tough. So people are like, oh, she'll be fine. She's not gonna admit that she's sad or whatever. And I got a sister that just kind of bottle everything in. So people are like, we're gonna ask her how she's doing. She's gonna say fine. We're just gonna accept that and move on. And my other sister, she's just kind of like, I don't even really know how to describe her. She's like, she'll say she's fine and like kind of make a joke out of it to make the other person feel like, oh, I'm okay. And people just accept that, even though they know she's not okay. But it helps them feel less uncomfortable, you know. And then my brother, he's a guy, so people are just kind of expecting him to just be like, oh yeah, I'm fine, I'm good. And again, they just accept it. But I don't know. I think it's kind of like the first week when we were planning the funeral, everybody was at my mama's house. So it was kind of like I was constantly surrounded by people. And I noticed like every time I got in the car and I was like by myself, I couldn't keep it together. I was crying, I was breaking down. So I just kept going to my mama's house and I just kept spending the night over there. And then we had the funeral, we had the repast, and then everybody came back to my mama's house after that. We talked, we laughed, we partied. It was fun. Next day, we went to my uncle's house. Everybody cooked. We talked, laughed, danced, all that again. And then it was like, okay, now everybody has to go back to their life. Like this sister got to go back home. That one, that one, that one. Everybody's leaving. And now it's just like, okay. Like in the real world, they don't give you time to grieve. It's like, oh, we're going to give her 3 to 5 bereavement days, but you got to get back to work. And I just feel like that's crazy. Like, you expect me to get over the loss of my father in 3 to 5 business days? And I just got to go back to work. I got to go back to being a mother, to being, you know, an employee, to just living life regular. And I just don't know how to do that. I don't. And I just kind of hate that. I don't know. I feel like I'm going through it by myself. And I know that my siblings and my dad's siblings, I know that they're experiencing this too, but I don't really want to talk to anybody about it, if that makes sense. Like, I have a friend who she just lost her father a couple months ago. So I know that she knows what I'm going through, but I don't want to talk to anybody about it. So I know that, like, partially I'm making myself go through it by myself, but at the same time, I really don't know how to process it, you know? And I feel like I haven't had a moment to myself to just process it. And it's like, when I do get a second, like I said, if I'm driving or something, it's just like I just break down and I just don't know. And I think it's because it's really, really fresh. And like I said, a part of me is just thinking, like, I just haven't talked to him in a couple days. But then you process it and you're like, if I call him, he's not going to answer. Or I can't see him again, like, ever in my life. And I think that the reality of that is just so bad. And I hate that. And people are always like, I wish I could just tell this person that I love them again, or that I this and that and that. And I know that my daddy loved me. And and that was the last thing we said to each other. I saw him. He came over to my auntie's house when I was there, and he hugged my kids, and he gave them a hug and a kiss, and he gave me a hug and a kiss, and he said, I love you. And I said, I love you too, Dad. And that was the last time I saw my daddy and talked to him. And I just don't know how I'm going to have, like, monumental moments in my life and not be able to talk to him about it or share things with him, or, you know, because me and my dad used to have good conversations. He's really just like my brother a lot. Like, you can get them to talk and not shut up, and then sometimes you just can't get them to talk at all. It's weird, but that's just how he was. But I've never been through, like, I've experienced losing somebody that I'm close to, but it was when I was younger. And as an adult, losing somebody that means this much to me, that literally created me and raised me, it's just like, yeah, you're grieving, but you still got to feed the kids and bathe the kids and clean up after the kids and pay bills and go to work and run errands and do this and do that. And life does not pause. And then it's like I'm trying to check in with my mental, because it's like I don't want to drown in grief or depression or whatever. But at the same time, it's like, DJ, you have to grieve. You have to process this. But then it's like, how? How do you grieve? How do you process this? How do you sit down and tell yourself you will never see your daddy again, but just be okay with it? I don't know how to do that. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm on edge. I'm like, I want to put my mama in a cocoon and make sure like nothing can happen to her, because I don't know how people live without their parents. Like there's people out here who lost both parents. And even that, like at the funeral, I was just sitting there and I was just looking at my dad and I was like, I really didn't have a lot of sympathy for him when he lost his mom and his daddy. I just lost a grandfather that I wasn't that close to, and I lost a grandma that we spent a lot of time with my grandma Joe. But it was just kind of like, oh, she's my grandma. She's getting older. She was sick. We're preparing for it. We expect it. I never had to look at it from the point of view of like, my dad lost the woman that raised him, you know? So when he would say certain things like, oh, it's my mama's birthday today, or da da da, I would just kind of, again, like, oh, yeah, well, how you feel, Dad? You okay? But I could never relate to that pain. And it's like, I really, really hate the fact that I can relate to that pain now. And I kind of, like, I made a joke about it when I was reading my um, section in the obituary. And I was just kind of like, he always wanted me to get married and marry like this great guy and everything. And now that I think about it, like I said it at the funeral, like he's not going to be able to walk me down the aisle. But in reality, like he's never going to meet my husband. Like I'm never going to have that moment to be like, because my dad loved my brother-in-law and he like truly approves of him. And like I'm never going to have that moment to introduce my fiance or my boyfriend, my husband to my dad. I don't know. And it was just kind of weird. Like when we were all at my uncle's house, my uncle and his daughter were there and they were just joking. And they said something like, she just said something like, yeah, well, I'm your daughter. And it was just like, I mean, I hope it wasn't awkward for them because I didn't want to make it awkward for them because that is his daughter and he is her father. But it was just kind of like, I don't know, it just kind of hurt to see them have that moment because it was like I'm never gonna have that moment with my dad again, or I'm never gonna be able to joke and play with my dad again. And I don't know, like I've been blessed to have a lot of father figures in my life, even with my dad being alive, you know. But I've been blessed to have a lot of uncles that, you know, are like father figures for me. But during that time, like when my dad was alive, it was like I still have my daddy, you know, like I can still go to my dad. And now it's just like, yeah, I have father figures that are uncles or whatever, but I'll never be their daughter, or they'll never, it'll just always be a difference. Like, I'll just never have my dad's love again. And I think that that's the biggest thing. And I think that's the hardest thing. because I genuinely got to experience my dad's love for me for 31 years. And it's like, now you got to go the rest of your life without ever having that again. And I don't know how to accept that. And I just don't understand it. Like, I genuinely don't understand. Like, I know eventually everybody dies. I get that. But y'all don't understand. My daddy was Superman. And I just don't understand how he died. Like, that just wasn't supposed to happen. And at the same time, again, I mentioned this, in the obituary, like how I said, I kind of watched him go through this like depression, and it really hurt me to see that. So it was kind of like, now I'm trying to look at it from a place that's not selfish. Like, I know he's not going through this life anymore. I know he's not, battling addiction. I know he's not battling depression. I know he's not sad anymore. I know. And even through all of that, like through him, sorry, it was a bug, but through him going through all that, my daddy still smiled. My daddy still cracked corny jokes. My daddy still made the best of everything. And I think that that's kind of where we get our sense of humor from. And I think that through whatever we gone through in life, me and my siblings can always crack a joke about it, even if it's on our own selves or each other, whatever. But I just, the one thing that does give me a little bit of peace is knowing that he's not going through, what he was going through here on earth. And I said, I think it's a little selfish only because, like, I might have took him for granted before, but if I could have him the exact same way he was, like, I wouldn't even blink about him being an addict. I wouldn't care about him asking me for this, or, me being irritated, like, why can't you just get help and stop doing it or whatever. I would take him just the way he is, just to have him again. And like I said, I think that might be selfish. I don't know. I don't know. But I think that, I don't know. It's like I said, you can't have the same compassion for someone if you've never experienced it. Like, yeah, you can feel bad for them, you can cry, you can do all those things, but you never know what it's like until you unfortunately have to find out what it's like. And I just think this is the first one for me that really, like, I lost a close cousin years ago, and that was a lot. Like, that was hard for me. It was very, very hard. But I think losing a parent is totally different. And like I said, I didn't have as much responsibility. I didn't have kids then, I didn't have bills. So I was able to kind of take that time to grieve and have those moments and just pause my life. Whereas now I can't, you know. And I kind of, like, I hate that. I hate that it's like life just goes on. And it's like people are still doing stuff. People are still shopping, going to work, just laughing, joking. And it's like nobody stops for you to just be like, you lost your dad? Let's just sit down and talk about it for a while. Like, it does not stop. Life continues to go. And I just don't know how people are okay. Like, when you really think about it, like, people are really going through stuff and they just still show up for work. They still show up for their kids. They still show up for their family. I don't know. But to my daddy, I want to say sorry first. I'm sorry for trying to force you to be this man that I thought I needed you to be, and not focusing on how much love I did have from you and how great of a man you were to me. And I'm sorry for not taking the time to get to understand you more and just get to know you a little bit more. And I'm sorry for the times that I was a brat, which was probably a lot. And I just want you to know that I love you. I've always loved you. I will always love you. And I will always be a daddy's girl. And I want you to know that I miss you. And like I said, you will always be my Superman. And I just really, really love you. I really love you. And I think that that is it. I love you more, Dad.